Malik Carter was in his early 30s. He walked with quiet confidence and wore a sharp navy blue suit. His smile was warm and his eyes showed kindness, but he didn't talk much unless he needed to. Most people didn't know that Malik was the CEO of a rising tech company. He didn't brag or show off. He believed in working hard and staying humble. After years of struggle, he had finally reached a place in life where he could afford first-class tickets, but he never acted like he was better than anyone else. Tracy was a flight attendant in her mid-40s. She had worked for the airline for years and was proud of her job. But lately she had grown tired and impatient. She was the kind of person who made quick judgments. She believed she could read people right away, and she was often wrong. Mrs. Bennett, sitting in first class, was an older woman with silver hair and gentle eyes. She didn't talk much, but she noticed everything. She believed in being kind even when others weren't. Captain Rodriguez was the pilot of the plane. He was calm and fair, the kind of leader who didn't rush to judgment. He believed every person deserved respect, no matter who they were or what they looked like. The story is told through the voice of a woman, someone who sees everything from the outside but feels every moment deeply, like it's happening to her too. The plane was boarding for a long flight from New York to Los Angeles. First-class passengers were already settling into their wide leather seats, sipping water and checking their phones. Everything seemed normal. Then Malik walked in. He moved quietly down the jet bridge, holding a leather laptop bag and a small carry-on. When he stepped into the first-class cabin, he looked around, then gently placed his bag in the overhead bin above seat 1A and sat down. Tracy, the flight attendant, watched from the front. Her eyes narrowed. She stepped toward him, her smile tight and fake. "Excuse me, sir," she said, "this is first class." Malik looked up, calm as ever. "Yes," he replied, "that's correct." She raised an eyebrow. "Can I see your ticket, please?" Without a word, Malik pulled out his phone and showed her the digital boarding pass. It clearly said Seat 1A First Class. But Tracy didn't back down. Her tone changed. "Did you get upgraded at the gate?" she asked. "Sometimes there are mistakes. This seat is usually reserved for our top-tier flyers." Malik's jaw tightened slightly. "No mistake," he said. "I booked it myself." People nearby started to glance over. Mrs. Bennett, sitting in 1B, looked uncomfortable but said nothing yet. Tracy leaned in. "Sir, if you don't move, I'll have to call security." The air grew heavy. The other passengers could feel it, something was wrong here, and it wasn't Malik. Malik stayed quiet. He didn't raise his voice. "Go ahead," he said, with calm eyes. "Call whoever you need to." That made Tracy pause, just for a second. Passengers were now watching. Some were whispering. A quiet tension filled the cabin. Tracy took a step back and turned toward the cockpit. She was heading to get the captain. The moment hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Nobody expected what was coming next. The airplane sat at gate 47, just about ready for takeoff. It was a large jet, rows of economy in the back, but up front first class looked like a different world. The seats were wide, almost like armchairs. Soft lighting glowed from the ceiling. Quiet music played in the background. People spoke in low voices or scrolled through their phones. It was a place meant for peace, comfort, and quiet. But peace was starting to fade. Most of the story happens inside this small space. The front of the plane isn't big, just a few rows, but every word, every look, and every decision in that cabin matters. There's no room to hide. Everything is close, and when something goes wrong, everyone notices. As Tracy walked down the narrow aisle toward the cockpit, passengers sat frozen. Some stared out the window, pretending not to notice. Others peeked over their phones or leaned slightly in their seats to hear what was going on. The plane hadn't even left the ground yet, but the pressure was rising fast. There are a few flashbacks in the story. Short ones, like when Malik closes his eyes and remembers his first plane ride as a kid, flying coach with his mom who saved for months. Or when he worked 2 jobs just to buy his first suit. Those memories remind him who he is, and why he stays calm, even now. But the heart of the story, the real battle, happens right there in row 1. The story takes place on a regular weekday morning, just before a cross-country flight. The plane hasn't left the gate yet. Passengers are still boarding. Some are finding their seats, some are placing bags in overhead bins, and others are just settling in with headphones or books. Everything unfolds over about 30 minutes, but it feels much longer. The rising tension, the quiet stares, the awkward silence between words, it all stretches time. Each moment builds on the last, like stacking blocks higher and higher, until something has to fall. There are no flashbacks that last more than a few seconds. When Malik remembers his past, it comes in quick pictures, like blinking. A soft memory here, a small lesson there. They help him stay grounded in a moment that could break someone else. The present moment, though, is where everything changes, and it all happens before the wheels even leave the ground. Tracy didn't wake up planning to embarrass anyone, but sometimes people don't need a plan to cause harm, just a set of beliefs they've never questioned. When she saw Malik sitting in first class, her mind didn't ask if he belonged. It assumed he didn't. She thought he might have gotten lucky. Maybe an upgrade. Maybe a mistake. Maybe someone else's seat. Her thoughts came fast and quiet, but they were loud in how she acted. Tracy had served thousands of passengers in her career, but in her eyes, Malik didn't fit the first-class look. He wasn't old, he wasn't white, and he wasn't wearing a watch that cost as much as a car. She judged him not by his name or his ticket, but by his skin. Even when he stayed calm, even when he showed his boarding pass, she kept pushing. Not because of a rule, but because of a feeling she didn't understand or didn't want to face. For Malik, this wasn't new. He had walked into fancy meetings before and been mistaken for the delivery guy. He had been followed in stores, asked to leave restaurants, and called sir with a tone that didn't sound respectful at all. Still, he never raised his voice. Not today, not now. Because Malik understood something Tracy didn't. Real strength is quiet. He knew who he was, he had earned that seat, and no one could take that from him. The other passengers didn't say much, at first. Maybe they didn't want to get involved. Maybe they were just afraid, but something about the way Malik sat there, calm and still, made it harder for them to keep pretending everything was normal. Mrs. Bennet noticed it too. She could feel the wrongness in the air, even if no one said the word racism out loud. And while Tracy thought she was in control, thought she had power in her badge and uniform, she didn't know that someone else was watching. Someone with more authority than her. Someone who knew the truth. And he was just a few steps away. As Tracy marched toward the cockpit, the air in the cabin felt thick. Everyone could sense it, something wasn't right. And Malik, he sat back in his seat, his posture straight, his face unreadable. He wasn't going to argue. Not today. Not here. Tracy was barely a few steps away from the cockpit door when Captain Rodriguez appeared in the aisle. The captain was in his early 40s, calm with a gentle authority that came from experience. He wore a crisp uniform, his epaulets gleaming in the soft light of the cabin. He looked around and immediately noticed the tension. "Tracy, is there a problem?" he asked, his voice neutral, but with an edge that suggested he had a lot more control over the situation than she realized. Tracy hesitated for just a second. Her eyes flicked toward Malik, and then back to the captain. "Captain, this passenger is in the wrong seat," she said, her voice thin. "I've asked him to move, but he refuses. I think there's been some sort of mistake." Captain Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. He looked over at Malik, his gaze softening immediately. "Malik," he said, his voice warm. "Is everything okay?" The whole cabin went silent. Tracy's face went pale. She blinked, clearly not expecting this. "You know him?" she asked, her tone a little too sharp, her mouth open as if she had just made a huge mistake. Malik nodded slowly. "Yes," he said simply. "We've met before. I'm Malik Carter." The name seemed to hit Tracy like a wave. She had heard that name before. She had seen it in the news. Malik Carter wasn't just any passenger. He was the owner of Carter Technologies, the company that had just secured a major partnership with the airline. In fact, the tech systems the airline used to streamline boarding were developed by his company. The very reason Tracy could scan boarding passes so quickly. His software. The passengers in the cabin seemed to hold their breath, some of them glancing at each other. Mrs. Bennet, sitting across from Malik, raised an eyebrow and gave a knowing smile. She had seen the whole thing. She had watched how Tracy had treated Malik differently, like he didn't belong. I'm so sorry, Mr. Carter, Tracy said, her voice now trembling slightly. She was trying to regain some control, but it was too late. The damage was done. Malik didn't answer right away. He simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement. He wasn't interested in making Tracy feel worse. It wasn't about that. For him, it had never been about revenge. It was about what was right. I understand, Malik said, his voice soft but firm. But I don't need an apology. I just need you to remember that we're all people, and we all deserve to be treated with respect. Captain Rodriguez turned to Tracy, his expression no longer neutral. Tracy, I think we need to have a conversation, he said firmly. Now. The rest of the passengers stayed quiet, unsure of what was happening. Mrs. Bennet stood up from her seat, her cane tapping lightly on the floor. She looked directly at Tracy. You should be ashamed, she said, her voice soft but powerful. You don't know anything about that man, but you thought you could treat him differently. And that's wrong. We all saw it. I saw it, Tracy flushed red, but she didn't speak. She just stood there, unsure what to do. The captain motioned for Tracy to step aside, and he led her down the aisle toward the galley. As they walked, Tracy's face stayed flushed. The murmurs of the passengers followed them, quiet but unmistakable. Malik sat in his seat, not looking at anyone, just waiting for the flight to take off. He had a quiet strength, one that didn't need to shout or demand attention. He knew that the truth would come out, even if it took time. As the plane finally began to taxi down the runway, the cabin began to settle. The hum of the engines filled the air. There were no more harsh whispers or stares, just the steady rhythm of the plane moving forward. Malik looked out the window, his mind far from the moment. He thought about how the world was changing, how people like Tracy needed to understand that biases weren't just hurtful, they were dangerous, and how sometimes karma worked in strange ways. Mrs. Bennet, sitting quietly behind him, gave him a soft smile. She didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes spoke volumes. She had seen what happened, and she knew the truth. She had witnessed Malik's dignity, his calm in the face of unfairness. And in that moment she saw that he was more than just a businessman. He was a man who had learned to rise above, to be more than the assumptions others placed on him. As the plane soared into the sky, the passengers settled into their seats, each lost in their own thoughts. And somewhere, deep inside the cabin, a lesson had been learned, not just by Tracy, but by everyone who had witnessed the moment. Sometimes the truth doesn't come with loud words. It comes quietly, and it always finds a way to rise to the surface. As the plane cruised above the clouds, the tension in the cabin slowly melted away, but the lessons lingered. Passengers settled into their seats, some staring out the windows, others lost in their thoughts. The flight continued, but the story wasn't over yet. Not really. Malik sat quietly, his thoughts far from the airport, far from the uncomfortable moment in first class. He had learned to rise above situations like this. He had no choice, but it didn't make it easier. It didn't make the weight of those assumptions any lighter. Still, he knew something Tracy didn't. Strength is in calmness. Strength isn't about reacting. It's about knowing who you are, and trusting that the truth will always come to light, no matter how hard others try to hide it. As the plane continued its journey, the reality of the situation hit home for more than just Tracy. The passengers who had quietly watched, the ones who had looked away, they all had seen something. The look in Miss Bennet's eyes, the captain's words, the way Malik sat there without a word, they all spoke volumes. This wasn't just about one man and one flight attendant. This was about something bigger: respect, dignity, and breaking the assumptions we hold without even realizing it. Tracy's apology had been quick, forced. She hadn't truly understood the damage done until she saw the faces of the people around her. She had underestimated Malik, but it wasn't just him she had wronged. It was everyone who had ever been judged because of their skin, their clothes, or their background. That was the real lesson. Malik didn't need her apology. He didn't need anything from her, really. What mattered was that the truth had come out, and it had done so without shouting, without violence, just the quiet strength of a man who knew his worth. And in the end, that was the most powerful thing of all.